Hello, I'm Breanne McIvor, author of Where There Are Monsters, and I'll be reading from the short story The Course, a supernatural mystery. He's always had thirsty skin. Sitting in the rain, washing off the dirt from last night's exploits, he lets his paws drink. The air is streaked with thunder. He spent the earliest part of the morning retching up a chunky concoction brindled with blood. Tendrils of wispy hair have wrapped themselves around his fingers. There is no way hair like that could have belonged to an adult. A child, he thinks, feeling sicker. He doesn't know for sure, though. He can never remember. Looking through the rain, he sees Coraline's face behind the window. Her terracotta curls swirl around her head in an early morning mess. When the clouds have bled themselves dry, Coraline picks her way through the puddles. "It happened again last night," she tells him. "I know it happened. It is the thing neither of them knows. They try to medicate it with doctor's visits, sleeping pills, and hypnosis. But it still leaves their doors hanging off hinges, scratched, as if a giant wolf were trying to get out. It leaves Coraline to wake up to his torn clothes and an empty house. There is a local word for men who turn into monsters. Lagahu. But they have come to an unspoken agreement to never say the word aloud. After all, neither he nor she has ever witnessed it." "You remember it?" she asks. He hates the high, hopeful sound of her voice, almost making him wish he could remember. "No, but I've been throwing up all morning." The first filaments of sunlight find their way through the clouds. "Mrs. Cooper called this morning," Coraline says. "She asked if we saw her daughter." He barely has time to lean forward before the sludge bursts from his lips. His throat convulses with wave after wave, and even when his stomach is empty, he keeps heaving. Coraline has somehow sidestepped the vomit. "Cora, you must know that I would never—" "I know," she says gently. She stoops down and runs her fingers through his hair. "Still, I've been researching what we could do about it." "Researching?" "Of course," she says. "I think there are alternative channels we can use. Maybe visit a non-traditional doctor." "Non-traditional doctor? You mean Obia?" She brings her teeth to her lower lip and chews, as if tasting the word. "Yes, Obia," she says eventually. Where would he, or she, find a practitioner? The thought of Coraline asking around for someone who dabbles in the occult is ridiculous. "I Googled it," she says, as if he'd spoken aloud. And seeing his face, she continues, "They're business people like anyone else. They need to advertise their services." He isn't sure he can trust an Obia man who advertises online. What would an Obia man do? Pay for a Facebook ad? He wants to say that this sounds absurd. But isn't his whole life an absurdity? Why not? Now that they've discussed it, he's amazed that they haven't tried it sooner. She holds a slim arm out and helps him to his feet. He wipes the last of the bile from around his mouth. "I suppose we could give it a shot," he says. The road to the northern range was chiseled into the edge of the mountain long ago. Their car winds through its curves. To their right, the precipice gapes green. Trees have clawed their way up the steep rock face and are growing where he would not have thought anything could grow. So you really found this man on Google? It's a woman, Coraline says. In the car, a string quartet is playing Michael Jackson's Human Nature. Coraline is the only person he knows who listens to this kind of music. He doesn't know enough about music to be able to hear the instruments speak to each other like she does. When they first started dating, she would say things like, "Listen to the first violin." But she'd stop that. Maybe because she didn't want him to feel as if she were lording her upbringing over him. She'd been born to parents who played classical music at dinner and who discussed, in dead seriousness, whether Shakespeare was more of a comic or tragic genius. "Do you know what I'm thinking?" Coraline asks. He imagines that she's thinking that if she were in love with another man, she wouldn't have to go through this. "No," he says. "I was thinking that if this works, if you get better, maybe we can talk about having a baby." A flock of parrots rises from the canopy in a fury of flapping. He can't believe it. A baby? How could she even put such a thought into words? More than that, Coraline has never been the type to want traditional things. Wasn't that part of the reason she'd asked him out? Wasn't that the reason why, after years of dating, she'd told him that she didn't believe in marriage? Suddenly, he is aware that the car is very small and cold, and even if he wanted to get out, there is nothing but trees around them. There seem to be no words to capture the monstrosity of his aversion. Coraline turned 30 last month. Is this some sort of feminine thing, where she's worried that her woman's clock is ticking her baby-making years away? "Cora," he says, trusting that she will hear the meaning in his voice as she does with the violins. "I mean, we wouldn't do it until we're sure that you're better," she says. Only her hands betray her. The knuckles squeezing the steering wheel are bright red. "Is this something you really want?" he asks. "Yes. Look, I know why you're worried, but you would never hurt our baby. I know it." How can she know it? When they started living together, she'd thought he sometimes went to the bar down the road at night. He'd told her the truth. He couldn't really remember those nights, but he'd never told her about the disfigured shreds of human bodies that he woke up with. Skin under his fingernails, a mangled heirloom clutched in his palm, hair wrapped around his fingers. Somehow, she connected clues he wasn't aware of leaving. And even then, she hadn't left. Was it because she loved him? But why would someone like her love someone like him at all, let alone enough to stay? He thinks of Mrs. Cooper's daughter. A few months after she was born, Mrs. Cooper pushed her around in a pink pram, showing her off to the neighborhood. He remembers the awful smallness of the baby's hands. How could hands that feeble do anything? He'd taken the baby's foot in his own large hand and marveled that a whole human foot could nestle so snugly in his palm. No, best not to think about it. The deepest string instrument is groaning. Is it the viola or the cello? He's not sure. Coraline turns up a steep road. The car is almost vertical, and he wonders whether they can manage this ascent. Her lips are mashed into one another as if she can drag the car up by willpower alone. All around them is green. The car keeps climbing until they've reached what is, apparently, the end of the road. Coraline reverses into a minuscule space between a mora tree and a yellow pui. If she is afraid, she doesn't show it. There's nothing here, he says, and he's surprised to feel relief. Coraline insists, this is the place.